All right, all right, all right. Welcome to Psychomusiclyricology podcast. I'm Maurice Moss, along with the dude that is secure about his opinion. I'm reading like I had never heard it like 1,000 times. Mike, what's up, man?
What's going on, bro? How you feel?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Before we get started, I want everybody to go right now and subscribe to Psychomusiclyricology, available on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play Music, SoundCloud, or wherever you listen to podcasts. We also have a Facebook group page, Psychomusiclyricology Podcast Fam. You can join that group and share your feelings about all things music and have discussions with other music lovers. So today we're going to get right into the show. Before we get started, Sheldon is our normal host for the show, but he is an essential worker in the COVID epidemic. So if you see him on social media or wherever, give him a shout out and tell him thank you for your service for hanging out there while everybody is staying home. So the guests that we have on the show today, they really don't need an introduction. If you haven't seen them on the show, they were on episode 78, Beats and Eats. It was Marwin Moop Brown and Princess P-Funk Fry from Food Fidelity. Welcome, fellas. We're glad to have you.
Thank you.
What's going on, fellas? How y'all doing?
Man, doing great. Doing great.
I got it. Now I have become somewhat of a coffee snob. and I'm trying to cook everything I can figure out how to cook new in the kitchen.
That's what's up.
Yeah,
yes, sir.
You think you know something till you hit that foodfidelity.com website, and then you're like, "Ooh, that looks good. Let me try that."
It does look good, man. It does look good. I encourage everybody to check that out. If you it comes in handy right about now. If you're hanging in the house, you don't run out of ideas about what to cook. You're tired of cooking whatever it was, the 2 dishes that you knew how to cook, and you need a little something to spice it up. They go to that page. You got some good ideas, and a lot of it is like, oh, okay, I can do that. So I like
easy instructions. I got half my family getting ready to try to make that collard green slaw this weekend.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it a shot, and I got a couple of other family members. They're like, oh, I'm gonna try that too.
Yeah, we got some things in store coming up. So now that I got my hands back.
Okay. So let's talk about the hip hop bracket. So this is something, Moop, that you've been doing for a while. You and Prentice and the rest of the crew. So we don't have the sports going on right now because of what we're in the midst of. So it's nice to have some reminder that we did have sports at some point in time. I don't know if this will eventually. I don't know if we'll ever have a March Madness like we had before again, but we have something to take the place of that, and that is the hip hop brackets. So talk about, Moop, the music March Madness, where that idea came from, and when you started doing that.
Yeah, so I mean, as you know, there's always music associated with all the different recipes that are on the food blog, and so we decided that we wanted to make it more pronounced in terms of featuring like artists and music on the site. And so we've always had these ongoing debates about different artists, different groups, and seeing other people do it, and just trying to think about ways in which we can tie the music and food thing together. And honestly, I mean, like a lot of the artists are more like your unsung or underground types, and so we try to put them on blast and give them the proper credit that they deserve. And so we just thought that a March Madness bracket would be a good way to not only kind of make the connection between like food and music, but also showcase some artists that we like, that we just feel like aren't in the normal like discussion of like greats. And so that's kind of with the genesis of it. And then we decided to focus on groups, partly because, I mean, if you look at like most of the debates, it's always around individuals. Mm-hmm. And from my perspective, group dynamics make greatness as a group, like, much more there's just a greater degree of difficulty, in my opinion. And so that was kind of why we focused on like groups. Last year was the first year we did it, and we did R&B/soul groups, and kind of broke that out by, you have like your singing groups or your singers, and then you have your groups that can, incorporates musicians, so
right.
And we ended up, having a really good discussion, a lot of great debate on that topic. And so this year we, came back. We said, well, why not do hip hop? That's kind of a little different than your normal, like kind of top 5 MCs discussion. Let's talk about groups. And so that's kind of how it all came together.
So, so you talked about why you're doing groups. That makes a lot of sense, because you do hear just to talk about actual individuals. How are we defining a group? So, Outkast versus Wu-Tang and everything in between. What's a group?
Yeah, great question. We had some debate on that one too. I think like the natural is, okay, 3+ members, automatically gets you in. And then we had some discussions around, okay, you got a lot of duos. If you think about like your Outcasts or your Mobb Deeps of the world, you got 2 cats. Okay, if we want to get to 64, we're probably going to have to like stretch that from a duo to a group. And then it got really interesting. We started talking about the Eric B. and Rakims, the Gang Stars, when it's like, Jazzy Jeff and Fresh Prince.
Like a super producer.
Right, MC plus DJ. Yeah. Is that really a group? And if so, like, where do you draw the line? Right? And I think for us, we probably had more discussion around that one than the other. I think the others kind of made sense. Okay. So we debated whether or not to have kind of he's the DJ, I'm the rapper kind of, bracket. But at the end of the day, we couldn't fill enough like slots to kind of do a half and half. And so we just said, hey, we're gonna take the ones that we can actually make the case that the DJ was as influential and as important as the MC. And so when we had those scenarios, it meant that an Eric B. and Rakim would get in. It meant that a DJ Jazzy Jeff and Fresh Prince would get in, and what have you. So basically, certain DJs represent a group, or a band in a lot of ways. So.
Yeah, and I think part of the challenge there also, and I think you could elaborate a little bit on this, is that, as we started going through the list, one thing you see pretty quickly is that the whole concept of a rap or hip hop group has started to wane in the industry, right? I mean, you don't see like a rap group like you would see in days past. I mean, somebody like, I know I don't want to start an argument already, but you don't see groups like Run DMC, two cats and a DJ anymore. I mean, I'm trying to
think of one, but I don't even know if I could think of what are we talking about as far as current. I can't think of anything. I can't think of a group in the last 10 years that just formed recently. That's a good point.
And when you think about hip hop and its genesis, the DJ was really what was important. It was the DJ. At first, and then that's why all the hip hop groups at the time, we were talking, all of them were the DJ first, and then the rapper. It was Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince, Eric B. and Rakim. So it was always the DJ first. So now it's just become like this super producer, and then who they produce. DJs have really become almost obsolete.
Yeah,
as far as live shows are concerned, I should say.
Yeah. And what's the seeding process like? I know you talked about what defines a group, but how did you is it north, south, east, west, which I guess that kind of makes sense. Is it lyricists versus whatever? What's going on?
Yeah. We tried to come up with a lot of different ways in which we can see in terms of like defining what the region names would be, right? So is it by geographical location?
Right.
Is it by like the way the group is defined? Duo versus 3+ versus DJ and a rapper. And honestly, at the end of the day, there were no natural breaks for us to kind of like to say, hey, this is the way it's going to go. And then when you just try to think about it from a numbers perspective, we found ourselves, oh, okay, if we're going to do, based on, some of these definitions that we came up with, then we got to force in some people who probably don't belong in the 64. And so that just didn't feel right. Like, just from a credibility standpoint, just from an integrity standpoint, it's like, hey, no, fuck them. They ain't in, just because they don't qualify. And so at the end of the day, we even thought about hey, why not just say F the regions, and we're just gonna pick okay, who are the 1 seeds, who are the 2 seeds, who are the 3 seeds, just by tiers, and just throw them out there. And that became interesting because you got some matchups that people didn't want to see in certain times, right? So it meant that your favorite group, even though they're probably not in the top 10, you like them a whole lot, they're gonna get that ass tax, because they just happen to fall into, a bad matchup, right? And so we had that, definitely.
So let me ask Prentice real quick, because I think everybody's seen the list. What are some notable omissions? Because Marwin is talking about who got included, but who didn't get included that you think should have? Who was robbed?
Man, that's a very good question. I think from someone being robbed, I can't say that there was somebody on the list that somebody who should have made it that didn't, if that's what you're asking. Now, if you're asking a slightly different question,
what are both of them?
Okay. What are some upsets that I certainly didn't, expect? I mean, one group that made it a lot further than I anticipated was Salt and Pepper, right? And I mean, it's kind of hard to, today really, frame it up because, they were such a groundbreaking group, but lyrically, it's really kind of hard to put them in a tier with some of their male contemporaries. But they made it a lot further than I really expected. I mean, the fact that they
weren't better. They weren't better than Little Brother.
Right. That's kind of the point.
Exactly. I'm still swore about that.
Yeah. They
the fuck, man.
But what's the definition of better? Because that's where these arguments always go. Are we talking about record sales? Are you talking about mainstream success? What are you talking about?
Impact, right? No, that's you're. I don't want you to get too far ahead of the conversation because I kind of know where this is going to go. But you're absolutely right. That definition of what makes a group better is what made this whole experience of filling out the bracket, interesting to me because you had to think about it in several different tiers. Is it just their catalog? Is it their skill level? Is it the music? Is it their impact on the industry? There's different layers that you can start peeling back on this to determine how you're going to vote.
Yeah. Mike, what were you going to say?
I don't remember now. What were we talking about?
So who got robbed?
I was still tripping about Little Brother. That's what it was. I remember, because you said Salt and Pepper, and I remember thinking the time I looked at the bracket when Salt and Pepper moved, I just thought it was like one of those no-brainers. So I was like,
But if you're talking about impact, for example, now Lifetime is getting ready to put out a movie with Salt and Pepper. I don't think we'll ever see a movie with Little Brother. I mean, it's just because they had this mainstream appeal at a time where rap was still trying to get that foothold, or it was still getting its foothold. I don't know if it was trying to, but it was getting its foothold in mainstream music, and they were kind of part of that.
And that's I think that's the theme around all discussions about who is the best, whatever, is because, some people view it about, impact, that kind of thing. And then there are other people who say it's all about the artistry, lyrically, no Salt and Pepper album could stand a Little Brother. But when you look at,
I think you can say that without too much.
But when you look at like that particular bracket, I just looked again. It was 8-2. They knocked them. It wasn't even close.
It wasn't neck and neck.
It wasn't even a conversation. It was like, you know, nobody even thought about it. So it made me think that in that case, it was about impact, because I wonder how many people voted actually even know who Little Brother is.
And so that's a great point. And that was, I had a theory on it, because this would stress me out the most. Like when I saw that go down, like I created the bracket and I was pissed off. You know what I'm saying? Like, but I was thinking, like, we used to have like these debates about like golden era periods versus like, okay, do we have a tallest like midget like scenario?
Yeah.
And I think when like I go back to, you know, 2001, 2000, 2002, when Little Brother hit, you know, that was kind of a weak period in hip hop. That has, I mean, my point has nothing to do about the quality of like Little Brother, because I'm all the way in. I drink that Kool-Aid, sugar or no sugar, right? But you know, if you think about like just kind of where hip hop was, just going from like, you know, like 98, you know, which was like, I think like, which is kind of marks the end on the last golden age up until that point. When you think about like 2000 to like 2010, like there wasn't a whole lot as far as just like the number of quality groups or artists, you know, from a hip hop perspective. And there was
years of running together. To me, I'm trying to think about when stuff came out and whatever, because I'm like, I can't separate into this era, unless they're like huge, like Curtis Blow versus whatever.
Yeah. But so this is like this is Hot Boys, this is Cash Money.
Okay.
Like they're at the top. You know, they're the most popular at that particular time, right?
Gotcha.
So you know, if you were on like the kind of that New York style of hip hop, you know, Tribe, De La, like
which is this brother right over.
Yeah, you were completely underground at that point.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think because of that, you know, I remember when I bought my first Little Brother album, like I had nobody to talk to except for like P-Funk about it. Like, you know, it's like cats are like, man, what is that? Like, man, it's like the new De La, you know, but they weren't trying to hear that.
That's really an interesting comment, considering, because when you said that, I kind of gave like a Scooby-Doo, because I'm like, okay, I was listening to music then, but I was listening to the stuff that Mike was pumping out or talking about every week, because he was sitting up there on OK Player listening to every independent whoever that came out, and was like, check this person out, check this person out, check this. But if you weren't on, like, what were the few hip hop outlets at that time? There were you know, there weren't that many, versus now there's no such thing as underground. You're out.
Yeah, it's 106 in Park and whatever was playing on popular radio.
Yeah,
we didn't even have satellite then, so you know, it just became so. Yeah, I mean, you know, with the advent of the internet, we got to hear a lot of good music at that time. You know, it was a lot of good stuff pumping out at that time. But yeah, I'm like, I'm with Moop. I didn't have anybody to talk to Little Brother about, really, other than
you can get up on OK Play and talk about
tribe. Okay, but my tribe was on. You know, if I didn't have, you know, if I wasn't near the internet. But you know what, Moss? The truth of the matter is, remember, you introduced me to Little Brother.
Yeah, because I was sitting up there on OK Play.
Yeah, you were the one that introduced me to Little Brother. That
was Little Brother dropped when Cass was downloading 50 Cent off Napster. You know, that's what was kind of what's happening at that point in time. It's like
exactly. So we'll talk about some of the interesting matchups. What were some of the matchups that were like some competitive little matchups, in your opinion? Anybody?
I tell you, the one that was problematic for me, one of the first ones that was problematic for me was Far Side versus the Roots in the first round. That was problematic for me. I was like, see, this is times when I don't even want to vote. I just want to abstain. I don't want to hit no buttons. I don't want to deal with that on any level. And it reminded me, and I was thinking about this show today, because last night they played the 2008 NBA Finals, and it was the Lakers versus the Celtics. I'm a huge Kevin Garnett fan, I'm a huge Kobe Bryant fan. So I'm in a place like, who am I gonna cheer for? You know, and that's the same place I was in on that was the first problematic matchup that I saw. I was like, come on, man, don't do this to me.
Who'd you vote for?
Who'd I vote for? I voted for the Roots.
All right.
But that would go back to me. That goes back to one of those, like what Prentice was talking about as far as catalog, because it's like, it's from a catalog perspective, Roots, they totally dominate the Far Side, in my opinion. Even if you include the indie albums that the indie groups put out, they still don't add up like as a catalog to everything that the Roots has done since then.
And then, you know me, I'm a Black Thought disciple, so you know I don't think anybody can outrhyme Black Thought. So you know, it's just no way for me to choose anybody other than the Roots at any time.
Yeah, Prentice, what about you, man? What was an interesting matchup?
I mean, so we actually talked about this a little bit on some of our chats, and
fight.
No, it's actually I have an affinity for the Beastie Boys, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when the Beastie Boys and Goody Mob, you know, went up against each other, that one was kind of tough for me because, you know, the Goody Mob, as far as like, you know, flow, even though it was kind of a short impact, you know, as far as their albums were concerned. I mean, it was just so huge to me at that time. But when you look at the Beastie Boys, it was like, I don't know that people really appreciate what they did after they left Def Jam. So many people, you know, That's just true. Stopped with the Beastie Boys at License to Ill. And then, you know, they maybe have listened to Paul's Boutique maybe once or twice, but didn't really listen to it. And then some of the stuff after that, you know, I was like, man, the Beastie Boys have really been putting in work for years. But, you know, just internally, there was an emotional connection that I had, you know, with Goody Mob when they came out. And that kind of feeds into how the total bracket, you know, kind of played out as well. But that was one that really kind of struck a chord with me. And I know like right after that, it was kind of clear what was going to happen because Beasties went up against NWA. And, you know, you can't really not vote for NWA in that case, but, you know, they at least got it, you know, 75-25%. So some people did vote. I wasn't one, but I think that Goody Mob Beastie Boys was a tough matchup for me.
That's a really interesting point about Beastie Boys. I'm curious as to, do you think that their audience, would you categorize their audience after Paul's Boutique as a hip hop audience?
Hip hop heads, yeah. I mean, people who listen to it, I mean, they did. I mean, obviously, that was one group that I think they morphed into, you know, kind of rock a little bit for a bit. But I mean, they came back to hip hop, and you know, they've always had, you know, just, you know, hip hop, I think, in their veins. It's just, it wasn't the same as what people were used to listening to from a commercial perspective, I don't think.
Yeah. Martin, what were some interesting matchups in your opinion? You said one earlier. You got any more?
Yeah, I mean, just from a first round perspective, you know, I mean, I was struggling with a few, not because of, I mean, like I didn't have trouble kind of getting to like, okay, this is like the best group. I just had trouble that like damn, man, I really like this group, and I could really like argue, you know, for this group, but it didn't make sense. Like I was a huge Nice and Smooth fan, like love Nice and Smooth. I mean, like the chemistry and just like the different styles and kind of how that worked for them. But man, they were master with EPMD in the first round, man. And that's like,
I mean, I have to say, did they have more than one album?
Oh yeah, dude.
Oh, okay.
They got 3.
All right.
Oh, hey, but you know, again, that's what we were talking about, right? So like, when you get into like groups that, you know, just kind of have like, you know, you can just kind of look at them and say, all right, next round. Right? But then there are certain groups that just speak to you on a personal, like, you know, my man Mike is talking about, you know, Black Thought, you know, as like his guy. I like Black Thought, but he would never be like the guy for me, right? I like him a lot.
Let's cancel this show.
You trying to get the whole Zoom meeting.
Hit the button. Hit the button.
But,
start over.
But the one that really got me though was Houdini versus Ghetto Boys, and like I can't believe, as much as I think my man Scarface is like top 5 like MCs, but you cannot beat Houdini, bruh. That's Houdini.
That album, man, that was a bad. I mean, all of those that had some hits on it.
Man,
the one album that I'm thinking about, it was like you could like play that all the way through, and it was like it was a golden era, an example of a golden era hip hop album.
Yeah. You know, and another one that really threw me for a loop, and it's almost like when I didn't realize it was this bad till just now. I understood. I can understand why people chose Run DMC over Slum Village. I understand it. So in the sense that most people probably who don't really know who Slum Village is, but it was like 9-3. I mean it was like
you wanted that one to be neck and neck.
It was like 96-3%. I was just like, what the hell? I mean, I was just completely blown away by that. I didn't even know if it needed to be, but Slum couldn't get double digits.
It's the Kings, bro.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I mean, musically, like Slum Village is my like, and I was in Chicago at the time, like when they really came up. Slum Village is like my Midwest little brother, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
You know, again, you got like producer extraordinaire.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
But that's a bad draw. I mean,
I get it. I get it why people chose, but they couldn't get the 10% move.
hey.
They didn't even get.
I'm curious though. I'm wondering if you have an idea of like the audience, like the demographic of the folks who voted. Was it men, women, mostly? What was the percentage? Was it over 50, under 30? What were we talking about? Do you have any of those kind of stats?
Unfortunately, I couldn't. I could only see who came to the site, but like not everybody who came to the site like voted,
Mm-hmm.
like, right? And so I can't like get into who actually voted.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I will say, you know, once as far as the process went, I tried to be intentional about reaching out to, you know, different age ranges, different genders, and different like geographical regions, to make sure that was reflected, one, in the feeds, and two, like banking and trying to, you know, push those people to pull their network in so that we would have like a mixture across all of those different, you know, groups. I mean, the fact that Outkast won, I think that we had a lot of people from the South in there. Even though, like, you know, I'm a huge Outkast fan. That's just like my thing. I think the fact that Salt and Pepper won, I think we had some early female participation early on, or some cats that tried to align with the females. Right, and you know, I know for a fact, at least early on, until they all got bounced out, we had some younger people, you know, voting, because that's how Migos and like people like that, you know, kind of made the cut.
Who do we think was hyped up too much on this? Like, we talked about Salt and Pepper, like that kind of was like, I think everybody's kind of thinking that was a little outlandish for them to be. Who was that, Little Brother, that they were head to head up against? Yeah. So who else? It was kind of like, what was that about? What was that? You know, who else did we like overhype on this? Anybody?
I think anybody else was overhyped. I just think that I think when it came down to it, a lot of the matchups ended up being a lot just problematic in the end, you know, because, you know, and I'll say it from my standpoint, like you kind of mentioned, Salt and Pepper. I think maybe a lot of people voted for Salt and Pepper because they're really the only female group in the mix, right?
Yep.
I don't think there was another one. So I think that, you know, some people just voted for them until they just couldn't vote for them. Now I could be wrong about that, but I think that's the case. And then the problem for me is that I cannot be very what's the word I'm looking for?
Objective.
I was really trying not to use that word. But that's it. I wasn't gonna be objective. So, you know, everything that fell in line with Native Tongue and everything that fell in line with Dilla and that cross section, I couldn't see why they weren't winning. Like, you know, and then you get to a place where you just like, I just vote for whoever's out here at this point, because most of the people vote don't know what they're talking about. That's kind of how you get into your head.
Start justifying it.
Yeah, I was just like, these folks, this is not even fun anymore. These people are not making any. But that was because of my bias more than anything else. But it was a fun exercise because I don't think I've ever seen. You know, you had conversations about the top 5 MCs, but I don't think I've ever seen a group dynamic like this before, and I thought that was a fun exercise. It's what made it.
Yeah, I think it's a really good thing that you should keep doing. I'm curious about the Dreamville, because when I saw that, I was just kind of like, a group? Huh, really? I mean, what you know? Okay, they put out they have an album together, but was it? I just that one I'm like, okay, that's just kind of like J. Cole's little A&R little thing that he kind of feeds all his little artists through. I wouldn't compare them to any kind of real group dynamic, but I mean, I may be totally wrong with that.
It's like
didn't they have 2
records.
I thought they had two albums.
And because I only remember the one that just recently came out.
Yeah.
I mean, and it was because, and I know about it because there was a whole documentary, and they showed the process, and the process wasn't really, from what I could see, it wasn't the group performing. It was different people within that whole camp going off and making songs together, which was more kind of like a production exercise. So I'm like, okay, well, are you really gonna? And I don't know. I guess to me, it's like you said earlier, a group dynamic. I mean, that's a real, like, you know, one of the reasons why groups don't stay together is because they're like this. There has to be like some chemistry there, and it has to remain there throughout. You know, and you can tell when it kind of goes away, and it's like, okay, so that Dreamville, I would kind of like, if I was gonna pick it something, I would be like, hold up, wait a minute, I don't know about Dreamville.
Yeah, so, you know, just a few thoughts on it. I agree, but this was a conversation that we had a lot of, and it was 2 parts to, I think, kind of why they got in. The first part of the conversation was more or less around, okay, as we work to try to define groups, like, right, there are like groups, and then there are posses. Like, from my perspective, I saw them more as like a posse, as I saw, like, you know, the Juice Crew, right? Not an official group, but a collection of talent that came together for a record.
Right.
Okay.
And so, but I was, you know, basically talked into, okay, you know, you can say the same thing about Our Future, who made the cut.
You could.
I don't buy it, and you can't get me to buy it, but, you know, there are some who would argue that like a group like NWA or Wu-Tang is, you know, really just like, you know, a collection of guys that kind of came together with the intent, you know, especially Wu-Tang's clan, to be separate. But, you know, it was best to kind of financially and also just in terms of like put each other on to do the group thing. The other part to it, I think, like as we get into like some of the demographics and trying to have like full representation, like going back to our conversation around like, hey, there are really not a lot of like groups that have like come out in this period. Like that's as kind of close as we're gonna get. Right. So okay, all right, we'll loosen the standard a little bit to make that fit. And I think it'll be an interesting conversation.
Man, I'm not gonna sit here and let you. I can't sit here with this Wu-Tang hate coming from your mouth right now. That's just you see, you've been trying to get at me all night, and I've been trying to chill, man. First of all, okay, if we want to talk about groups, right? I agree with you that Dreamville could be could be one that you leave off, simply because that's probably not a group of guys that are going to tour together, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, now if you're going to use that argument, fine. But we all know that Wu-Tang toured together, maybe not all of them at the same time, okay? Somebody might not have made it on the bus. Somebody might have missed a flight. Somebody might have had a problem and couldn't make a show. But they at least 80 to 90% of them showed up to do the show.
Listen, if they fight,
so don't come
together,
with
they're a group.
Right. Don't come at me with this, they're just a collection of guys that happen to get together to record an album and change history. I mean, come on, man.
Man.
Got a point. I agree with all of that.
They're not even on the same label.
What's that got to do with anything?
As individual artists, no, but they are a group. They recorded as a group. So multiple albums.
So if you take that argument, then what about Black Star? Because Talib Kweli and Mos Def, they were separate artists. They came together and made this little group thing, but they only did the one album, and then they
count as a group to me.
Does that count? I mean, I'm not saying
they count as a group to me.
It's that's not like a posse cut. They did
a
posse album.
That's where this whole discussion is like. If you hear everybody having this discussion,
they toured together. I'm just saying.
And that's the whole thing. Everybody's got their own set of requirements to say, okay, this defines this and this defines this. Does it make sense to have this like across generations, or do we just would it make more sense to say all of the best groups prior to 2000 or all of them post 2000, and then some people would be like, okay, well, I don't know anything about anything that happened after 2000, so I'm not going to vote on that. Yeah. And you get actual better numbers if you say, hey, this is for this era of music. This is what we're voting for. Who were the best in this particular era?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. And we were debating this, and I can't remember who said it, but his basic point was, at the end of the day, you can debate, all of these things, but none of the people that we're debating and having this conversation about are getting past the first round. So why are we talking about it?
You got a point.
It's like, but Mike, back to your point on Black Star, because I agree with you 100%. And I think we debated whether or not they should get in because they only had one album. But I think what got them in, again, as we get back to kind of how people like kind of vote and kind of how people like think about whether or not somebody gets in or not, like that album is so freaking off the chain that you got to like consider them. Like, right? It's just like that's an exception, right?
That fits into my bias, where they came from, who they are, spit kickers, all of that. So that fits into my bias.
And you can also argue that whole super producer standpoint too on the Black Star thing, because are they really a group if you got somebody who's basically the production half of the team, like Fresh Prince and all. So you could argue another angle on that as well, as far as the production side of it and whether or not they would count as a group.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, like
everybody
well, because if you go there, then you bring in like the world's notorious group. You bring in them footprints as far as Tribe goes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
we already talked about Slum and Little Brother. Like as much as I put my personal bias is more towards the music side of it than the MCs, but yeah, there's a lot of that going on. I got a question for you. Mike, Professor, I would love your opinion on this one because this is the one that got the most noise in the first round. My inbox is blowing up on this one. and me and Funk had a long discussion about this one. The matchup with Bone Thugs and Harmony and Mobb Deep. That was the closest first round matchup.
And that's a good matchup.
And to me, it shouldn't have been.
I think it's a good matchup.
I don't. And simply because, well,
why not?
Because lyrically, Havoc and Prodigy, and then Havoc's production. I mean, it just for that proves to me on a lot of levels that this was more a popularity contest, as much a popularity contest as anything else. Because, you know, to me that's a no-brainer for me. I go straight to Mobb Deep without even thinking about it. You know, it's just, you know, and if for no other reason than listening to Eazy-E try to do features on Bone Records. You're stupid.
Do what now?
Eazy-E doing features on Bone Records. Like, you know, he was an awful rapper, and he shouldn't have been on anything anyway. So, you know, the fact that he was even on their records kind of cancels those out for me. Some of those out for me. So to me, now that you brought that up, it should have been easily Mobb Deep.
But see, there again, we're talking about what are you using as your criteria? Because to me,
even good music.
So, and I agree with you. I like
Bone Thugs and Harmony.
I agree with everything
I
you
didn't
said.
like them.
Yeah. The one caveat, and I kind of know why it was a little closer than I expected, because I was in the same boat. I'm like, why people even? I mean, why is this matchup even close? So I went back and I listened to some Bone Thugs again, and from a production perspective, they bit really, really well and really, really hard off of Dre. I mean, almost to the point that I almost have to wonder if Dre was in the studio on some of those cuts, because the production and the beats on their early music, their early albums, their early songs was up there. But I'm with you though. I mean,
Eazy probably still owned a lot of those tracks. So
yes,
you might can make an argument that they were probably Dre's tracks that somebody finished.
Yeah, exactly.
You know.
So Mike, here's I'm just playing this out, you know, because I'm curious on your perspective on this. So you talked, you know, glowingly about Mobb Deep, the production and the lyrics. So break down the Mobb Deep catalog for me.
Oh, the person who could do that is not me. So, because
that's my whole point. Everybody can talk about Quiet Storm, and then it's like, okay,
but you know,
we can talk about it. We could talk about a Bone Thugs and Harmony.
I'm not good at those. I'm not. If you play a Mobb Deep song, I can tell you it's a Mobb Deep song. Yeah. But naming all, you know, I can remember some of the tracks from that. And then again, this might be my bias. I can remember some tracks that Q-Tip produced.
Yes, up North Tip.
Yeah,
he set you up. It was a setup question, man. It was a setup. Go ahead, LP. Go ahead and tell him. It was a setup. He set you up.
Because you know what? Cliff does this all the time. And so I'm the one that can't name all the records. I'm the one, you know, if it ain't.
They had 2 albums.
If it's not the Roots and if it's not Tribe, I cannot name every song or every album. Talk about the catalog. I'll be honest about that. Or Prince. I'll be honest about that. But I know what I like and when I liked it and what it was about at that time. Yeah.
The reason I bring up, the reason I ask the question that way, because you know, as I try to get into like the insights of like what's driving why this is a tight matchup, but this was not. When I would argue, whether I'm devil's advocate or whether I just believe it, that with respect to Mobb Deep, they get the love that they get is because people felt 2 songs like so strongly, and so that shit halos to everything else they do.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's just right. No, and I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just saying like, but
it's just what it is.
But when you study them, like just from a catalog perspective, like they haven't done much. From a, you know, when you talk about recording,
Right.
Like,
I agree.
like I mean, that shit hits hard when Survival of the Fittest come on. Like, right? You know, all of that. You compare that to whether you like Bone Thugs and Harmony or not. They produce 3 albums with like some legit production on it. Funk, thank you.
And multiple hits.
And they had a lot of hits.
Yeah.
You know, so like, but you know, again, I get like why people will look at that and be like, damn, that's close. We talk about Mobb Deep, but if you study Mobb Deep and you study, you know, Bone Thugs, just from a catalog perspective, not from like, okay, the quality of the lyrics and you know all of that shit. Like, I can get there and say, okay, that's closer than what I would have like normally like would have thought.
But the next round they got trounced.
Who they get trounced by?
Wu-Tang.
They should have.
And they should have.
They got totally trounced.
Yeah.
Which
I get
that. I get that. But see, that 100 to 0, that's the part that I'm like, nobody like Mobb Deep. Now I chose Wu-Tang, but nobody like Mobb Deep.
So Maurice, Mike, I need y'all to put us on the spot and ask him who he voted for in that Elite 8 matchup featuring Public Enemy and some other group.
Some other group.
Okay, help me out. Who was the other group? Because I know British know, boy. What was the other group?
It was Wu.
Okay.
Who'd you vote for?
Yeah, I voted for Public Enemy. I had to bite. It took me a while to come to that conclusion. But
well,
you know,
what made you come to that conclusion? I'm curious.
So this is where you start getting some of those you start peeling back some of the levels and the tiers and the impact. So you start looking at the impact of Public Enemy. You look at what they were doing and when they were doing it, as far as the statements they were making early on in their music, right? You look at that, and then you look at I'm a huge fan of like the production style that is all PE, right? And I mean, we've had Moop and I've had several different arguments about that squad, right? And it's just like I had an affinity to Public Enemy that made it very difficult for me to vote against them, even though I love Wu-Tang. But like I said, when you start looking at like their impact on the music industry and the statement that they were making at the time that they were making it, plus you take a song like Fight the Power and the impact it had with corresponding with the movie, Do the Right Thing. I was like, they reached a level that just made it impossible for me to vote, otherwise.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah, but there's a lot of people that wouldn't be as objective on that, and they probably would go with Wu-Tang still on that one. I think. So you got a little bit of objectivity on that one. So Marwin, what's next for the hip hop brackets? The Music March Madness? Are you going to continue to do this? Was it the did you have the feedback or the engagement that you wanted? Are there what is it? Is anything gonna be different next time around? What's your next steps on that?
Yeah, I think we've talked about this. Like, I'm of the mindset I would like to come up with a topic that forces like massing of different genres, right? So rather than being like a hip hop bracket or R&B bracket, could we do something in which like you can pull from anything but country, because I don't mess with country. But electronic, rock, reggae, like whatever. So when I think about it in that context, just trying to think of like an agnostic, genre, it comes down to like something like maybe what you guys did with like breakup songs. Like, is there a song category that we can come up with to rank songs?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So one of the things that I thought would be interesting about this is like a follow-up to this, and I thought about this maybe a week or so ago, is to, like, for each of these artists, pull their biggest hit, like their best-selling hit.
Yeah.
And then just do a bracket based on the song.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah, just whatever, whatever their number one hit was at the time they were at their height, just do that and see see if the brackets turn out about the same.
Yeah.
To me that would be kind of interesting.
That would be interesting
because you're not talking, you're not forcing yourself to deal with the totality of their catalog.
Yeah.
Having that conversation about, well, they only had 3 albums, or let's go with the hits.
Okay. What's your track? What's your track, Mike?
My favorite track?
Yeah. By group.
Oh man. It's gonna come from it's gonna come from Black Thought. It's gonna come from the Roots. And it might be Distortion, the Static, something like that.
Great song.
I might have to go with like Distortion, the Static, one of those songs, or I would probably lean into something like maybe Tribe, Bonita Applebum, which it's not their best hit, but it's the one that I like the most. One of the ones I like the most. Maybe something out of the Black Star Camp. One of those jams, yeah. I'm gonna go with Distortion and Static. Let's just leave it at that.
Okay. I would probably pick, since my personal list would lean way south, so I would pick like My Mind's Playing Tricks or Cell Therapy, because immediately when those songs come on, I'm like, okay.
yeah.
Immediately I'm like, okay, I know when I first heard it, I'm getting pictures whenever I see that song, whenever I hear those songs. So yeah. Anything else, guys? Anything else before we wrap the show up?
I mean, the one thing I'd ask Moop if he could just comment on it. And I know it doesn't have much to do with music, but when it comes to what happens next with the bracket, what I suggested to him, I just want to get you guys' feedback on this, is do a bracket on the best kids cereal. My wife and I were having a conversation the other day about what was the best kids cereal growing up.
That's a controversial topic, man.
That's what I'm talking about. Because I couldn't believe it wasn't her favorite, but this came out of her mouth. She said she liked cornflakes. And I'm like,
I like cornflakes too.
Man, you can't even put milk on cornflakes. As soon as you put milk on cornflakes, they melt.
So I grew up in a house that didn't allow all that sugar on cereal, all that Cocoa Puffs and all of that. Yeah. So I never got an affinity for it. So I'm all about the cornflakes and the Cheerios. All right.
Yeah. If you got to add sugar, it's not cereal.
You're gonna drop the mic on that one. That's it. Yeah. That's the definitive definition on cereal.
I got you.
All right, fellas. So the next one will be about cereal. So we're looking for that one. Appreciate it, Marwin and Prentice, for coming on the show. As always, we want to thank everybody for listening to Psychomusiclyricology. Subscribe and watch on YouTube. Listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Google Play Music, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, at Psychomusiclyricology. We can be contacted at psychomusiclyricology@gmail.com. Our number is 469-606-9534. And until the next time, peace.